All right, let's jump into another deep dive. Today, we are taking a look at a topic that's been kind of hard to miss lately, melting glaciers.
Yeah, definitely.
And to really get a good understanding of what's going on, we are zeroing in on the Aletsch Glacier in the Swiss Alps.
Hmm.
You know, it's the largest glacier in the Alps.
Yeah.
So what's happening there is kind of a big deal.
Right.
We've got this fascinating article from NASA's Earth Observatory. It's called The Alps Are Melting, 4 Decades of Glacier Loss Captured from Space.
Okay.
And what really grabbed my attention were these incredible satellite images they have spanning 40 years.
Wow.
Talk about a serious wake-up call.
It is pretty amazing what we can see from space, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
Those Landsat satellites, they've been snapping these images of Aletsch for decades.
Yeah.
And looking at them side by side like that really makes you realize the sheer scale of the changes.
Absolutely. The article has 2 images, one from 1984 and one from 2024.
Okay.
And the difference is just mind-blowing. The glacier looks so much smaller in the recent image.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. In the 1984 image, Lech stretches across the landscape, filling the valley.
Right.
But fast forward to 2024, and it's visibly shrunk, both in length and width.
Yeah.
And that shrinking surface area we see, well, that's a sign of something even more serious. Massive ice loss.
So, okay, we can see the glacier getting smaller, but what we're actually seeing is the result of just huge amounts of ice disappearing.
Yeah, think of it this way. Imagine 2 bowls of water.
Okay.
One is filled right up to the brim, the other's only half full.
Right.
The lower water level in the second bowl shows you there's less water overall, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
It's the same with Lech. The shrinking surface we see is a direct indicator of how much ice volume has been lost.
Okay, that's a good way to put it, but why should we care that the glacier is losing ice? Is it just about appearances, or is there more to it?
It goes way beyond how things look. The shrinking of Lech has major consequences, not just for the local environment, but potentially for the entire planet.
So what kind of consequences are we talking about? Break it down for us.
Well, for starters, glaciers are like these giant reservoirs of fresh water.
Right.
And as they melt, it affects the availability of water downstream.
Oh, right, yeah.
Impacting agriculture, drinking water supplies, even hydropower.
Okay.
And then there's the impact on the delicate ecosystems that rely on these glaciers.
Okay.
Alpine plants and animals, they've adapted to thrive in these, unique conditions that glaciers create. As the glaciers retreat, their habitats shrink, putting these species at risk.
It's like a chain reaction. One change triggers this whole cascade of consequences.
Exactly. And on a global scale, melting glaciers contribute to rising sea levels.
Right.
Which is obviously a huge concern for coastal communities worldwide.
Okay, so we're seeing how this seemingly isolated event in the Alps is actually connected to these much larger global issues.
Yeah.
But let's get back to Aletsch for a moment.
Okay.
Do we know exactly how much ice it's lost? What do the numbers tell us?
Well, the Swiss Glacier Monitoring Network, GLAMOS, they're basically the glacier experts. They've been meticulously tracking Aletsch's changes.
Right.
Their data shows that since 1984, Aletsch has retreated over 1,300 meters.
Wow, that's incredible.
That's over 4,300 feet.
Wow.
And it's thinned by 43 meters in water equivalent over those 4 decades.
Wow, 43 meters. To put that into perspective, that's like a 14-story building of ice just gone.
It is.
That's a staggering amount.
It is. And to really grasp the magnitude, consider this. That 43 meters of ice loss, when translated into water volume, is enough to supply a town of thousands with water for an entire year.
Really?
It highlights just how much water is stored in these glaciers.
Right.
And what's at stake as they disappear.
This is clearly a big deal, and it makes me wonder, is Aletsch alone in this struggle, or are other glaciers facing a similar fate?
Aletsch's story, unfortunately, isn't unique. This dramatic change is part of a broader pattern we're seeing across the Alps. In fact, Alp's neighbors Oberaletsch and Fiescher are also retreating.
Really?
Though at slightly different rates.
Interesting.
The Oberaletsch has retreated over 240 meters, and the Fiescher over 1,000 meters.
Wow.
Both since 1984.
So it's like a whole neighborhood of glaciers in trouble.
Exactly, and what's even more concerning is that these losses are accelerating.
Oh, no.
The article mentions a particularly brutal heat wave that hit Switzerland in the summer of 2024.
Oh, yeah. I remember hearing about that. Wasn't it record-breaking?
It was. And for the Swiss glaciers, it was devastating. They lost a staggering 2.5% of their total ice volume in just that single year.
2.5% in a year. That's like losing a huge chunk of your savings in a single stock market crash.
Yeah,
It really puts the urgency of the situation into perspective.
it does.
But let's zoom out even further. How does what's happening in the Alps compare to the global picture of glacier melt?
That's a crucial question. While Alaska might be losing the most glacial ice in terms of sheer volume, it's actually Central Europe, including Switzerland, that's experiencing the largest losses proportionally.
So even though Alaska has those massive glaciers, Central Europe is being hit harder percentage-wise?
Precisely. Imagine two people. One loses $100 from a $1,000 account. The other loses $50 from a $100 account.
Mm-hmm.
While the first person lost more money overall, the second person lost a much larger percentage of their savings.
Right.
It's the same concept with glaciers.
That's a great analogy. It really helps to understand the difference between absolute and relative loss.
Right.
So Central Europe is losing a bigger chunk of its glaciers, even if the total volume of ice lost isn't as high as in Alaska.
Exact.
But why is Central Europe being hit so hard?
The article points to climate change as the main driver.
Okay.
Rising global temperatures lead to warmer summers and less snowfall in the winter.
Right.
That means glaciers aren't being replenished as much while they're melting at a faster rate. It's a double whammy.
A double whammy indeed. Less ice coming in and more ice going out. That spells trouble. But this isn't just an environmental issue, right? There are real social and economic impacts as well.
Absolutely. Melting glaciers can increase the risk of natural disasters like floods and landslides,
Oh.
which can displace communities, damage infrastructure, and even lead to loss of life.
So it's not just about a changing landscape. It's about people's homes and lives being disrupted.
Exactly. And the economic impacts can be significant too.
Right.
Glacier tourism is a major industry in many mountainous regions.
Yeah.
And as glaciers recede, those areas face potentially huge economic losses.
That makes sense.
Think about a place like Zermatt,
Okay.
the iconic Swiss village nestled at the foot of the Matterhorn.
Right.
Aletsch is one of its main attractions, drawing visitors from all over the world.
I see.
I can see how losing that glacier could have a ripple effect throughout the entire local economy.
Exactly. Hotels, restaurants, guides, shops, they all rely on the influx of tourists who come to see the glacier.
Right.
As the glacier shrinks, the appeal diminishes, and so does the revenue. This raises important questions about how these communities can adapt.
Right.
Perhaps shifting from traditional glacier tourism to something like ecotourism, focus on educating visitors about the changing landscape.
Yeah, so finding new ways to attract visitors and tell the story of what's happening to the glaciers.
Exactly.
That's a really interesting idea.
But at the end of the day, the root of the problem is climate change, right? What can we actually do about it?
That's the billion-dollar question. Addressing climate change is a global challenge, and it requires a global response.
Okay.
We need to drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions
Right.
by transitioning to cleaner energy sources and adopting more sustainable practices.
That sounds daunting, I have to admit. What can we do as individuals? Does our everyday behavior really make a difference?
Every single action matters.
Okay.
We can reduce our individual carbon footprint in many ways, from using public transport and cycling instead of driving, to being mindful of our energy consumption at home. We can also be conscious consumers, supporting businesses that prioritize sustainability.
So it's about those everyday choices, adding up to a collective effort.
Exactly.
But what about those of us who aren't scientists or policymakers? Can we do anything beyond our personal choices?
Absolutely. Never underestimate the power of raising your voice.
Okay.
We can support policies that promote renewable energy, sustainable development, and climate action.
Right.
We can vote for leaders who prioritize these issues.
Yeah.
We can talk to our friends and family about these issues. We can even contact our elected officials and advocate for change.
So it's a combination of individual action and collective effort, changing our own habits and pushing for systemic change.
Exactly. And research and innovation are crucial as well.
Okay.
Scientists are constantly working on developing new technologies and solutions to mitigate climate change and its impacts.
So while the situation is serious, it's not hopeless. There are things we can do both individually and collectively to make a difference.
Absolutely. And remember, knowledge is power.
I like that.
The more we understand about the issue of melting glaciers and its connection to climate change, the better equipped we are to advocate for change and make informed decisions in our own lives.
So, dear listener, this deep dive has shown us just how much is at stake when it comes to melting glaciers, but it's also shown us that we have the power to make a difference.
These stunning satellite images aren't just pictures from space. They're a call to action.
Yeah.
They're a reminder that our actions have consequences, but also that we have the ability to change course.
I love that a call to action. And speaking of those images, they really are incredible. We've talked about how much they reveal about the glaciers themselves, but they also highlight the incredible advancements in technology that allow us to monitor and understand these changes. Imagine what we'll be able to see and learn in another 40 years.
The possibilities are both exciting and daunting. It's up to us to shape the future.
It is.
What will those future images show?
Right.
Will we see continued retreat and loss? Or will we see signs of recovery?
Yeah, that's the question that I keep coming back to. It's like we're holding up this mirror, and those future satellite images, they're going to show us, the results of the choices we're making today.
It's a powerful thought. It really drives home the point that the future of these glaciers,
Yeah.
and really the future of our planet, it's in our hands.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the melting glaciers of the Swiss Alps, I think we've covered a lot. We started with those amazing satellite images of Aletsch, showing its dramatic retreat over the past 40 years. And then we dug deeper, exploring the alarming rate of ice loss and what it means not just for the environment, but for communities and the global climate as well.
Absolutely. We've seen how Aletsch's story isn't isolated. It's part of this much larger trend of global glacier melt, driven by climate change.
And while that's definitely a sobering reality, I think we've also highlighted that it's not a hopeless situation. There are actions we can take individually and collectively to make a difference.
Absolutely. We have the knowledge, the technology, the resources to address climate change and protect our planet.
Yeah.
What we need now is the will to act.
And that's where you come in, dear listener. This deep dive has given us a lot to think about, but it's also a call to action. What can you do to learn more about climate change and how it's affecting our world?
Yeah.
What choices can you make in your daily life to reduce your carbon footprint? How can you use your voice to advocate for change?
The melting of glaciers, it's a stark reminder that our planet's systems are all interconnected.
Yeah.
As these icy giants shrink, it raises some really profound questions about our own future and the legacy we'll leave behind.
What an incredible and thought-provoking conversation. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.